What's up, everybody?
Hello.
Welcome back to episode 3 of Catch of the Day, your wonderful gaming podcast where we talk about all things tabletop, MMORPGs, RPGs, and beyond. I'm Tim Anderson, aka Renfell, joined by Nathan Napalm, and we have a special
Hello.
guest who may or may not be able to participate depending on his internet being cranky, but Idlador is here, aka Joey, my brother. I'm joined by two passed out cats, Luke and Leia, behind me. Um, so, welcome everyone. How are you guys doing?
Doing good, man. How are you?
Doing
Glad to be
well.
here.
Joey, you need to get a fishing pole, bro.
I have one.
Bruh. Okay. I think there's some ponds over here, Nathan, we can get to.
Okay.
Where
So
you
for
guys
those,
at?
Arathi Highlands. For those of you who have never tuned in to an episode before, this is our third episode, and the way this works is we call it Catch of the Day because we fish in World of Warcraft Classic while we talk about a topic, which is our Catch of the Day, that topic. Today's Catch of the Day might be something that dives into multiple episodes because it is I would say it's a controversial topic
Sure.
because it's something that's hard to nail down and hard to define, and it's something that we see a lot of people claiming um, they see in games, but when we really come down to it, at the end of the day, is it really happening, or is it something that is just a misconception or a misunderstanding, things of that nature? And that is player toxicity. And does it really exist? Or is it simply a matter of a misunderstanding, a miscommunication, things of that nature? And I know everybody has different ways of defining what is toxic. Some people will say that someone pulling your mobs is toxic behavior. Other people will say that stealing camps is toxic behavior. Other people will say whatever. There's lots of different ways to define toxic behavior. Nathan and I briefly talked about this before the show, and we were saying that in both of our cases, we've never really come across behavior that would be toxic enough to define our experiences in MMORPGs. Like they're very few and far between those experiences. But if
Yeah.
you tune into any of our live streams during the mornings when we've been playing with Maduros and et cetera, we've had a lot of chatter in both of our YouTube streams from people who will make grand claims like World of Warcraft is the most toxic game they've ever played, and they've met so many toxic people in World of Warcraft, and so on and so forth. And when I see people make those claims, I usually kind of sit back and go, really? Okay, let's define what that toxic behavior is. And I find that most times, from what I've heard and what I've seen, the toxicity that is being described is nothing more than a brief moment in time that someone has allowed to consume them, and it has become this defining experience that has quote unquote ruined the game for them, when there's so many other factors. I think Davin on my channel, Dave, had said, how many times could those encounters be something that's actually the fault of the person who is feeling like the other party is to blame? And how many times have we in real life had things happen where, like let's say we're at a four-way stop, and everyone's kind of got who's got the right of way at that four-way stop sign, and then someone's
Mhm.
gonna go and someone else is gonna go, you motherfucker, that was my turn, you shouldn't, why would you, who's right in those scenarios. So I'd love to open that up and sort of, the chat can talk about some stuff. I'd like to bring some things to the table. Nathan, I'm sure you've got things as well.
Yeah, I'd like to start off with just saying that, like, for me, as we said before the show, I haven't had a whole lot happen to me personally. Um, I mean, I've had a few things that were small. Um, I would just say that I think that most of the toxic behavior that people encounter in MMOs is generally just someone had a bad attitude, or um, said things very harshly, which could have probably been worded better, and it wouldn't have seemed as bad to the person that was on the receiving end. But I would also say that everybody has a bad day, and to somebody, you're probably being toxic at some point while playing an MMO, even if you didn't intend to be. Um, I think World of Warcraft specifically gets that title mainly from general chat in retail, where there just is actual toxic conversations happening, right? From the most racist things you've ever heard to just the most idiotic things you've heard to political discussions to arguments over religion. And I mean, it's just general chat and retail WoW is a breeding ground for idiocy. So to me, retail WoW toxic. There are the things we talked about previously on the show where you might get kicked out of a group you join in a instant queue dungeon type situation where you don't have good enough gear or something like that, and they just boot you. You know, there's a little bit of that that goes on, but once again, the ease of play, the how accessible that World of Warcraft retail is, I feel like kind of negates that. Unless you wear your sleeves unless you wear your emotions on your sleeve, then like big deal, somebody's a jerk, requeue. Chances are the next person probably won't be, right?
I like the somebody's a jerk, big deal, boo-hoo, because I think that
Yeah.
if more people had that attitude, because we do in the real life, when someone's a jerk to us, move on. Like it's
Yeah, we
sticks and
kind of
stones.
laugh about it in real life, don't we?
Yeah,
We're kind of like,
sticks and
wow,
stones.
did you see that? Like, it's unbelievable. That guy was just a total a-hole, you know? And then you move on with your life, you know? You might tell a few people about it because it's a funny story. But for some reason in MMO, I think that's where the person's anonymous and it bothers you more because you don't even know who that person was on the other end being a jerk, right? It kind of makes it a little worse, I think, maybe, for some people.
Joey, you've had some encounters with getting kicked from a group, right? Back in retail.
Yeah, it was before they had like the new player realms and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't just like once, but you know, it happened a lot. Like I tried to requeue for the same dungeon just to get the completion, and would get kicked again. Just for being a noob.
I've heard that happen to a lot of people, by the way. It only happened to me once, though. It did happen to me one time in retail WoW, where I went into a random dungeon. It was a dungeon I needed. I've told the story too many times to repeat the whole thing, but basically, I had to do that dungeon to get the gear to do the next thing that I wanted to do, right? It was like part of the literal Googled, how do you make progression gear in World of Warcraft retail? That was the next dungeon I should be running to get gear, and as soon as I joined, they said something in party chat like, your gear sucks, bro, and then I was booted out. And I was like, wow, what a jerk. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be for my gear. And I just requeued. And that was it for me. That's all I saw.
So I want to bring this up because... Go ahead,
yeah.
Joey. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, I had it happen for like 10 levels straight to where I finally just gave up trying to dungeon. Like,
dang, dude.
Yeah, it was rough.
Somebody else brought up a good
cry,
point because I want to mention this because this is something I have noticed, so I always, by the way, if there's a role play server, I join it.
Yes.
That's just, I've been that way. So it is true that people on role play servers are generally nicer people. That's why I joined those servers, and I do like to see role play. I might not be good at it, but I really enjoy other people doing it and trying to participate in it every once in a while, right? I just think it's like having walking NPCs, like in the world, So I'm a big fan of it. But so that may be why I haven't seen it as much, is because I like those types of servers, and they typically have them. They have nicer people. And even in a game like World of Warcraft Retail, where you queue up for a dungeon, if there's people on your server, it will queue you with those first. Or at least that's what it seemed like to me. It was more often I'd be queued with people on my server. That happened a lot. Let me just put it that way. I would be queued with people on my server more than some other random server. So that may be why I've been able to avoid it for the most part.
Yeah, and it sounds to me, based on both of your guys' examples, that what we're seeing is generally less of a case of, at least from my perspective, it's less of a case of people being toxic and more of a case of you're on an established server where people don't want to deal with new players.
Yeah,
And so they
that's
don't
right.
have the patience to want to run the gear. So this actually happened to us today. So we are on an established server, the Peggle server. I almost never pug, but I was wanting to get a quest done, and we needed to run. I can't remember the name of the dungeon. I'm gonna go look it up because I want to make sure it's in Zoldrak. It's the Gundrak. Wanted to run Gundrak for a quest with my Death Knight, and at the time that I wanted to do a quest, there weren't really a lot of guild mates available. So I need to invite Joey. I had myself, Aya, who came to heal. She was level 80. I'm level 77 on my Death Knight. And then we brought um, Biddy Boop or Biddy Bop, who is
Mm.
Vowelless in chat, and they were only
Mm-hmm.
level 72. And the dungeon is level 75 to 80. So it's a higher
Sure.
level dungeon. And we
Sure.
picked up a couple of pug people for DPS. And within a couple of minutes, Biddy Bop did not have we couldn't summon them because they were too low level to be summoned to the stone, and they didn't have the waypoint, so they had to travel by foot. So they were taking longer, and one of the pug people got a little antsy and sent me intel and said, "What the hell, are we carrying this level 72? What's going
Oh
on?" And I
boy.
said, "Yeah, they're a guildmate, so we're going to bring them along with us." And he was like, "They're not going to be able to hit the mobs." And I said, "They'll be able to hit the mobs, they just won't be doing, peak DPS." And he's like, "Well, I'm not here to carry someone, so I'm going to
Oh
leave."
boy.
So he left. The next
Okay.
person, the other pickup person, started to get a little cranky and was saying in group chat, "What's taking so long?" And I said, "I already explained in group chat. They are traveling here on foot. They'll be here in a few minutes." We got into the dungeon, and Biddy Bop was hitting the mobs, no problem. Although, albeit doing less DPS than they would have been doing had they been level 75, but they were still hitting the mobs and doing damage. And the other pickup person, literally said in group chat, "Dude, you're only doing like 200 DPS. I can't handle this. I'm out." And he left the group. Now, in some people's eyes, this would be considered toxic behavior. They're not willing to let someone be a new player in that dungeon. And I'm not saying that
Right.
Vowelless is a new player. Biddy Bop is not a new player,
Right.
but it is a
Right.
new character.
Right.
I don't view that as toxic behavior. I view that as just these people have different priorities. They're not in our guild. And here we are asking them to do a dungeon run. They want to do a quick 10-15 minute dungeon run. They don't want to do a 45-minute dungeon run because of we're carrying someone through the zone. And the way they express that might come off as being a little bit dickish. But that's one of those things. I don't view it as toxic. I just brush it off and be like, "Yeah, it's people being people. It's no big deal." If we're in the guild together, obviously we don't have a problem
Right.
with the levels as long as someone is at least can hit the mobs. I mean, you don't have to be, it could be within 4 to 5 levels.
So we can
fine.
clear the dungeon
Right.
somehow, right?
Yeah, right. But to some people, that behavior would be considered toxic, and they're going to immediately
Yeah.
go, "This is why I don't group with pugs. That's a fucking pugs are always like that." But that's not
Well,
the
you know
case
what it
because I've
is.
also had a lot of good encounters with pugs.
You know what it is? For like, I would say at least minimum 90% of toxic behavior could also just be defined, and should actually be defined, as what it really is, which is elitism. And that does exist.
Sure.
Elitism, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm a perfect white squeaky clean knight myself. I've been in situations where I've done that content so many times that I didn't say it, right? I wasn't a jerk and, start typing and being a jerk in chat, but at my computer out loud to myself, nobody else could hear me, I wasn't streaming, been like, this idiot, like, how does he not know how to do this? This content is like 7 years old, you know what I mean? When probably that guy never done it before, you know what I mean? But it got on my nerves because, I've ran it 500 times, and it was just like, this is very basic stuff here, this isn't anything complicated. So, and I think just some people just say the things they think, you know what I mean? And they say them in chat, and that's elitism, right? To a new player, that's not good. That doesn't show a good community, and that's usually what's actually happening here is the person is just tired of doing that content anyway, for a daily, because they're making the new character and they got to get through it for whatever it is, and they get bad attitudes. I think it mainly comes down to that.
The curious thing for me is people who have carried grudges for 20 years about something that happened in an MMORPG 20 years ago, and they will always go back to that one example and use that as some sort of a case study for why all people are toxic. And that's the one when Dave brought that up in my YouTube chat one night, I was like, "Oh my God, that's a brilliant topic," because he was saying, how many times have these encounters that happened 20 years ago, how many of
Happening,
those
yeah.
encounters were actually a misunderstanding, first of all, or how many of those were the person who felt offended was actually the one being the dick, and they just aren't willing to accept it because they have this mentality of, well, no, it can't be me. No, it's the other person. Like, I feel like that might come into play. The thing that interests me is, why do people hang on to something from 20 years ago and use that as some sort of proof positive that toxic behavior exists? Because I've heard arguments across the board for, Guild A did this and they didn't let us access the content, therefore all raid guilds are toxic. Or, PvP game, this person did this to me, and I'm guilty of this, by the way. This person did this, therefore all PvP games are toxic.
Right.
I will firsthand say that I am guilty of not liking PvP because I had a couple of bad experiences 20 years ago. And looking at my own behavior, I don't view that as toxic. I didn't view those people's actions as toxic, but it did leave a sour taste in my mouth enough so that I've never really wanted to put myself out of my comfort zone to attempt PvP again because it was
And
such a meh
I
experience.
think what happened to you there, it wouldn't take much bad luck, right? Like, for example, what happened to Joey. Um, that would be enough for one human to say, you know what, I don't like either, and where they want to place the blame depends on the person, right? I don't like this game. Maybe they'll say, I don't like instance dungeons. I don't like pugging. There's many avenues you can take to be like, you know what, I don't like something that has to do with what's causing these problems, right? Um, so it's not surprising that people feel that way if they ran into a bit of bad luck and ran into some. I would say maybe there are just bad human beings, okay?
Sure.
That straight up they play MMOs and they're just horrible humans, right? And they literally get off on making other people upset. Those people exist, and I'm not even counting those people because that's a troll. Um, and those people play World of Warcraft. Those people play Final Fantasy 14. They play. Um, they're everywhere. Okay. They're mostly in League of Legends though. But besides that obvious fact, um, uh, But that's. I want to make it clear. We're not saying that trolls don't exist. We're not saying that like bad attitudes don't exist. What we're saying is that generally, when a bad thing happens to you in an MMO, right, and you consider it toxic behavior, maybe consider the other person's point of view, and maybe it wasn't as bad as you think it was, because a lot of the times it really isn't. It's usually not. Sometimes it might be your fault and you don't even know it, but even if it's not, it's usually just a misunderstanding, where the
What
person is there for a different objective than you are. You know what I mean?
what about kill stealing? I mean, that's pretty
Yeah,
toxic. Come on.
well, kill stealing doesn't exist in modern games though. If you look at
Well,
retail
that is true.
Retail WoW and Elder Scrolls Online, they've gotten rid of kill stealing because everyone gets credit for the mob as long as you tag it. So the idea of kill stealing, that's why they implemented that mechanic so that people would stop getting butthurt over people stealing my mobs, because they just decided that, well, we're just going to phase everything. We're going to phase all the resource nodes. We're going to phase all the quest objectives. We're going to phase all the mobs. Give quest sharing, give tag sharing, give resource sharing. They got rid of the issues and made it so that everyone can get credit all of the time, so that customer support didn't need to deal with those issues. So, I mean, kill stealing sure it exists on old school servers like Classic or P99 or these emulator games, or looking at the TLP servers. Although TLP servers know because they don't recognize camps, so it is on a case-by-case basis which games recognize camps. Back in the day, I would say that that's definitely one of the ones that's come up in a lot of topics over the years. Is people say, kill stealing is toxic behavior, and I'm torn on that because on the one hand, and I've brought this up in the past, on the one hand, let's say the game recognizes camps. So we can lump camps and kills in the same group here. If you're the first person there, it's supposed to be first come, first serve. So if you're there, they're your mobs, you were there first, and as long as you're able to clear those mobs and keep those mobs cleared, then they're your mobs, it's your camp. Everybody else needs to wait their turn. But
Sure.
how long is too long? Because you'll also see those same people who claim that first come, first serve, this is my camp, respect my camp. Those people will also get upset when the raid guild does that exact same thing, but then locks down the content so that no one else can ever complete it. And so they permacamp the mobs or the camp 24/7 with 200 guild members, and they don't let anybody else progress. So that's a catch-22 because on the one hand, I do see the value of respecting camps, but on the other hand, if I'm in the guild that's number one on the server, I'm absolutely going to monopolize the shit out of that because I don't want anybody else to be as good as me. So am I toxic for doing that? I don't know. It's going to depend on the point of view of the person. But I don't think that's existed for a very long time.
So it doesn't exist in modern MMOs then?
It hasn't for, I think, when did they
No, I'm saying toxic.
Well, I would say that it exists, but in a different way now, where it's just a lot less annoying. Because, for example, I was streaming last night playing, and there's those situations where you need a particular mob, but you got to kill some mobs before you can get to the particular mob, and then here comes little douchebag Danny running by when you pull the mobs in front to kill those so you can get to the mob you need. You're obviously there, but you've got the mobs pulled. Path is clear now. Douchebag Danny runs in and grabs the mob. No, obviously, that's what you're there for, right? He doesn't invite you to the group, nothing. He just runs in and grabs the mob, right? So it does still exist. It's just that now you have to wait a few minutes, right? A minute and a half, 90 seconds. Not long, and the mob comes back. It's no big deal now. But it does still exist, and I would say it's still aggravating, right? It's easier to laugh it off now and just be like, what a douche. You know what I mean? And I do think that there's a lot of douche behavior, for sure. I wouldn't necessarily call it toxic, because it's one of those situations where everybody does it to some extent, right? Like, if you can't admit that you also do it sometimes, then you're just lying to yourself, because yes, you did. We all do it to a certain extent. Let's go within that same stream that I called that guy douchebag. If you go back and watch the whole stream, which I'm not telling you to, it's a long stream. I'm saying you will find me doing it where I'm like, you know what? Screw you, buddy. I'm grabbing. I've been here all day. So I mean, you know what I mean? Like, sure, I called the guy douche, but then I was a douche a little bit later, right? Because it was a crystal, I think, if I'm remembering right, and I've been down in that freaking mine forever, and somebody had pulled some stuff, probably was there for the crystal. Why else would they be there? You know what I mean? I was like, you know what? I've been here all day. It's the last one I need, and I'll be out of your hair. I'm stealing that crystal. And I grabbed it, right? Same thing. Same thing. I'm just willing to admit it.
Yeah,
and I think if everybody did, we'd live in a better place.
I mentioned that during one of our previous sessions, I think, or during one of our live streams at the very least, when I was talking about how if you know that everyone is going to do it, then you might as well do it yourself, and that'll save you a lot of headache. Because it's kind of like we were trying to do it was a couple days ago now. We were doing the arena event in Zoldrak, and it's kind of like the Ring of Blood in Nagrand, which I know you did, Nathan, where your whole group can spawn the encounters in the arena, and you have to go through like 5, 6 rotations in a row. But everyone in the group needs to be ready before you accept the next mob, because it's going to spawn the boss mob, and other groups can spawn the boss mobs if you take too long. And so there's
Then
this
you gotta
chaotic.
wait for them.
Then you gotta wait
Yeah.
for them. So we were there, and there was a group in front of us, and they asked us to wait, and we said, sure, we're happy to wait. And there wasn't a lot of people around, so we decided to wait. And then while we were waiting for them, another group came up, and they didn't want to wait, and they triggered it twice during that group's rotation. And at the end of that group thanked us for being kind enough to wait. It was like, no big deal, I've got plenty of time, and I'm chatting with people on the stream. It's all good. So then we decided to start our rotation. And sure enough, we got like 2 or 3 mobs deep, and all of a sudden here comes another group, and they triggered the encounter even though we're trying to turn in our quests. And then here comes another group, and they try to trigger the encounter while we're doing. Here comes another group, and finally I said, you know what? Fuck this. I'm done waiting. I'm done trying to be polite. I'm trying to let these be. I'm just sitting there, and I'm gonna spam that right click button as fast as I can and hopefully get the quest. And somebody actually gave me a tip. They said you can actually go into Questy and turn on like this automated accept button, which I haven't done
I
yet.
didn't know that.
And then
Okay.
you can hold like shift or something, and it'll like automatically, like, it'll try to auto accept quests. And I was like, oh, that's brilliant for those types of scenarios. I haven't done that yet. I need to look into it. But it was like at the point where it's like, if you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah,
It's
when
like,
in Rome. Yeah.
yeah, when in Rome.
Yeah.
And is that douchey? Yeah. Is it toxic? No. It's just the way people play games.
Not
Because
toxic, yeah.
it's at the end of the day, we're all
You'll-
playing a monthly sub, and we all have equal right to the content. So it's first come, first serve.
First come, first serve. And sometimes that's not fair and it hurts somebody's feelings, but guess what? They'll do the same thing to somebody else. Give them a few more minutes, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, what goes around comes around, and there's a little bit of not fun goes around, and that's okay. That's okay. Like, in my opinion, if there are no negative experiences that happen to you in an MMO, none, zero, everything's positive, nothing bad happens to you, then that's a shitty game. I'm sorry, it is. It's a crappy game. It must not offer enough options for players to make enough decisions then for you to even feel like you're impacting or doing anything. If there's no way for a player to do anything negative to another player, then in my opinion, you've made a very flat, boring game. That's my opinion. You need a little bit. There's got to be a little bit of that because it's part of the gameplay. Like, I think of those. I'm thinking of the guy that stole the kill from me last night, and makes me smile. It was something happened in a game with another player. It's not always going to be a happy kumbaya moment, right?
Content is king.
Yeah.
So here's another question, because the other thing you brought up is that I know a lot of people will like to say, well, they will always try to use World of Warcraft as the definition of a game of the most toxic game of all time. And I'm sitting here going, I still have yet to experience any toxicity in this game. Have I come across a couple of douchebags? Sure. But I've also met 40, 50 amazing people in pickup groups and quests that were really cool people who
Sure.
aren't part of our guild and have had really good positive experiences. So one could say that because there are so many more people playing World of Warcraft, it stands to reason that the reason you might come across more douchey behavior is not because it's more prevalent in World of Warcraft, but simply the fact that there are more people playing this game, therefore there are more chances for you to run across douchey behavior. But we've already established douchey behavior does not equal toxicity. The chat one that you mentioned at the beginning, I feel like that's a non-issue because it is so
You
simple.
turn it off. Yeah.
Exactly. All you do is right click, go to filters, and you immediately turn off general chat. I do that in every single mmorpg I play. I haven't used general chat since before voice chat existed, which was, 20 years ago. So in terms of people claiming that, oh, toxic, look at the group chat, look at the general chat, that's proof of toxicity. Turn it off. Like,
Yeah,
turn it off.
Yeah.
Just
Those people too that are doing that are, what happens in general chat is it's got that reputation, right? So people specifically come there to be ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like, that's what it's for now. So it's like a meme that is so old that it's a meme of a meme of a meme of a meme. Like, and so, of course, it's ridiculously bad. That's what people are there. Everybody that has it turned on, that's what they're there for. There's no other reason to be in general chat, in my opinion, in World of Warcraft retail. Besides, if you're so bored, you're like, I want to read what the idiots are saying, right?
And it's usually political. It's usually political.
And it will offend anybody. You cannot.
Or
and
it's
that's the purpose of it.
it's-
It's to offend everybody.
Or it's also guys like Asmen Gold who deliberately run around and they'll type the word anal and then paste something after that, and they'll
Something
do it.
with the game, yeah.
Yeah, and they'll do it until they get banned on that account, and then they laugh about it on stream because it's a piece of content for Twitch. Like they're purposefully trolling to create content for their stream, and is that toxic? Well, maybe it's a different type of humor that you and I don't appreciate, but that I wouldn't view that as toxic. I just think that's different. It's like a different type of humor that maybe I just don't chuckle at as much. I want to sidetrack slightly because it's Vice is asking some things. Casual Guild, no raid farming requirements. At this point in time, there's no farming requirements, and I would say at the moment there's no raid requirements, but in the future there may be requirements depending on what we want to do as a guild, because there may be certain encounters that require us to get a certain amount of amount of gear score, a certain amount of defense, a certain amount of hit, like Madurek just did. Toxic. But for the moment, there's no. We don't have any. We don't have any raid or farming requirements for our guild at the moment. We actually need to get the roster up this week so that people can start putting their names on the roster, because I think we're going to be trying to maybe do something towards the end of the month.
Yeah.
Anyway, not to sidetrack too much. I think this is Val. It says, I think the bulk of toxic players were years ago. The bulk of its players now are more mature, so they may act like a douche, but they're not toxic anymore. Crickle says, Gen Chat is the Twitter of MMOs. Can anybody give me an example of something that's truly toxic? Like, I can't.
I can.
Okay.
A website, actually. Reddit. Reddit is super toxic, and it promotes it with the systems that it uses for upvotes, right? I think if you want to know what toxic is, go spend an hour browsing across Reddit, and you'll find what toxic is. I think in an MMO, because I know that's what you meant. I was just doing a little joke there.
Sure.
In an MMO, to me, toxic now, for me personally, it has to be. It wouldn't even be allowed. You would get banned for it now, right? Like racist, something just so vile acts, or, and this is hard to do in most MMOs, but it can be done. It was done in Final Fantasy 14 recently, blocking content from people being able to do it. That's toxic behavior. When the game was designed for a way for people to do it and everybody to do it, and yet the players find a way to stop people from doing it. That's super rare. I don't think it can be done in WoW. Maybe it can. I just don't know.
Can you give me an example? Because I can't.
Yeah, like 14. Like Final Fantasy 14 is exactly one thing. I've seen it in other games. Like, for example, Conan. When that game first came out, people were blocking off. Actually, I want to say they did it maybe in New World at first too, but where that game you couldn't just walk through players, right? So with the physics of the players,
you're talking about
they
colliders.
could block you. Yeah, like colliding, so you couldn't. They were literally blocking off mountain passes.
Yeah, that happened in EverQuest back in the day. You get the barbarians who thought it'd be funny to come to Kelethin and park their little fat ass in the bank, and no one could get into the bank.
Right. Stuff like that. I think that actually is toxic. Like, you're specifically doing something to make other people not be able to have fun. In Final Fantasy 14, they tried to kick Asmen Gold out of their community or whatever, so everybody piled up on their giant mounts around all the quest givers, which is what you need for the story, and that way he couldn't continue the story, which they got banned for, by the way. World of Warcraft, I would say you have to play on the only thing I can think of is if you play on a PvP server. There's that. Do you guys remember that quest where there's quite a few, but the one in Westfall where you have to escort the guy, and you got to wait a long time because only one person can escort him at a time. And then when you finally do get the escort, it's long. He walks all the way down to where that dungeon is in Westfall. And on the PvP server, high chance that one douchebag on the horde is going to come there and just stalk, waiting for somebody, because they're walking. They're obviously a low player because they're doing a low-level quest, and just one-shot kill them. Pop out of stealth, kill them. And they'll wait, and the reason they make it even more toxic is they'll wait till you're almost at the end of that, right? So that means you're going to have to run all the way back to where the quest giver is and wait in line again. And then they're just killing people as they go, right? That's pretty toxic, because you're not getting anything out of that. You're not getting honor points or badges, or you're getting nothing. You're literally just there to ruin everybody else's good time. But it's a PvP server, and to be honest, open world PvP, that comes with it. It happened to me when Classic first came out, and you know what I did? I just logged out, and I went and did something else, and I came back later that night when it was really late, and I finished the quest. So, to me, that's the best examples I can give.
Last time I experienced toxicity, I'm reading this from chat. Last time I experienced toxicity was when Shadowlands released. I made a dad joke in general chat to some chatter joins, spent 30 minutes dealing with multiple people harassing me in general chat and whispers till I finally just logged off. And had one person who I blocked log on another character just to keep harassing me. The Claxis. Could you explain that a little bit more, Vice? What do you mean by classic max levels hanging out in Stranglethorn? Because I think I know what you're talking about, and I saw someone the other day.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't agree with that one at all. If this is what I think you're getting at, you could be saying something else. But I remember this is a couple weeks ago. I was running around with one of my higher level characters in a lower level zone, and going after some updates that I needed for a quest. And someone was complaining. I wasn't the only high level in the zone doing this. Someone was complaining about all the high levels stealing all the mobs that they needed for the quests.
Oh, yeah.
And
well, maybe they were getting faction.
Well, there's multiple things going on here. Like, maybe the high levels are here for faction. However, maybe the high levels, like myself, just didn't do the quests when they were on level, but now they're coming back and doing the quests now that they're high level. Why don't high levels have equal... shouldn't high levels have equal rights to the quests? I mean, people are like, well, it's not fair that a high level should be able to come in here and take all the quest mobs. I'm trying to do a quest. Well, so am I. Just because I'm 50 levels higher than you doesn't mean that my quests are any less valid than yours. And, oh, I'm here to grind faction. Is my faction grinding less valid than your questing? Now, I will say if someone is trying... Like, let's say there's 20 mobs in an area, and the high level comes in and pulls all the mobs, and so there's nothing left for the little guy. That does suck. It does. It does suck. But at the same time, I wouldn't say that that's toxic. I would say that's douchey, but not toxic, because those mobs are going to be back in 3 to 5 minutes. It's not that big of a deal. You know, it's one of those scenarios where it's like, you know, go take a bio, whatever the case may be. Now, when does it... If it keeps going on, it's going to suck. Do you send that person a tell and say, hey, man, because I've done this before. I've literally been in that person's shoes, and I've literally sent the person a tell and said, hey, do you mind leaving me at least a few mobs because I'm trying to get some XP and stuff here? And I think every single time I've ever done that, I can't think of a single time where the person came back and said, fuck you, man. You know, I've always heard them say, oh, my bad, didn't see you there. Oh, no problem. He'll leave you these 3 over here. Like, being willing to reach out, I've usually found that eliminates the problem, which comes back to, I think that's one of those areas where it's a misunderstanding that the behavior is toxic in the first place, because people aren't willing to initiate a conversation. They just assume that the other person is there to grief them. It's like, well, everybody's got a different agenda. You know, they don't... My agenda is not going to be the same as your agenda when I log into play, because I'm not paying your sub. You're not paying my sub. Let me go back and read chat now. Not the mobs, just the high levels body camping.
So you're talking about PvP then, I'm assuming? Is that what he's talking about then?
Possibly.
Yeah, just body camping and just literally just murdering a low level. And Stranglethorn's a good place to, because both the Horde and it's a good spot where both the Horde and the Alliance are in the same zone questing together. And then, you know, the characters most likely there are, what, 30-ish, somewhere in that range. So a high level come in and just raffle stomp them all day, and then go to where they just camp their body so they can't do nothing. That is pretty trolly. That's why the PvP servers got hit so hard. If you guys remember when Classic came out, everybody was saying like, "Yeah, you want to play Classic, you got to play on PvP servers. That's where it's at." And then everybody left. Like the PvP servers, people started abandoning them because what do you know? People came and started trolling people. That's what happens on an open world PvP game. I mean, that's the way it has been since the beginning of time. Ultima Online, first open world PvP, same thing. Like it's always been that way. So
Did you
it's
ever
not really shocking.
have you ever played PvP, Joey?
Not in WoW. I did some in Star Wars.
Yeah, but see,
Long time ago.
that's like
But
consensual, kind of like a arena game.
yeah,
It's kind of like a basketball game. I look at it like that. I'd say that looking at, and I would also argue that that's one of the reasons I've never been able to enjoy PvP is because here's my original PvP experience that made me never want to try it ever again. I had one in EverQuest 2 and one in EverQuest 1. So my EverQuest 1 experience was been playing with some friends of mine. We had a static group for a long time. We decided after like 2 or 3 years of playing the game that we wanted to try PvP, so we were going to go start a little some halflings. Started them in Riverville, Missy Thicket, had some fun. Excuse me, got them up to like level 3 or 4 and decided we were going to try to make our way to Kelethan. And
Okay.
we got through um, the forest, got through Kithgor, and we got to the edge of the Common Land zone line. We were going to log over into the Common Lands. And as we got to the zone line, we were immediately hit by these high-level players who wiped us out immediately. They were just camping the zone line and wiping out anybody trying to come through the zone. We came back. They did it again. We came back a third time. They did it a third time. And that's when we just said, you know what? PvP's not for us. Then I
Yeah.
just never tried it again in EverQuest 1. Flash forward to many years later, EverQuest 2 I attempted to try it, and I had quite a bit of fun. I got to
I
like
did too, Nick,
mid
you too.
20s on a PvP server in EverQuest 2 until I got out. I forget where we were. It was like Neck Forest or something. And maybe they've changed it since then, but back in the day, people would people would camp the spawn points. And so you would get a brief moment when if you got killed, you would respawn at a point. There would be a brief moment of invulnerability. And basically what everyone would be trying to do would be to get away from those spawn points as quickly as possible to try to get away before the invulnerability faded. But inevitably, I just basically got caught in a death loop where I just died like 5 times in a row to these people who were camp spawning the spawn point, and I said, this is no longer fun. Like the part of like going out there, and the thing that I think could be fun is like, oh, your guild wants this mob. Well, let's see who's going to get this mob. Is it going to be your guild or is it going to be my guild? We're going to let you take it, and then in the middle of the fight, we're going to come up and we're going to attack you from behind, wipe you out, and you've already taken the mob down to half health, and now we get the mob. Haha, sucks to be you, bitches. Like that kind of stuff I could see being kind of like cutthroat but fun, and within the realm of that's what PvP is set up to be about, to have those types of encounters and to need to watch over your shoulder and